On the evening of June 12, 2015, 16-year-old Sarah Turner, a popular high school junior from the small town of Greenwood, Indiana, vanished without a trace. Sarah had been planning a late-night study session for a history exam at her friend's house. She texted her mother, Linda Turner, saying she would be home by 10:30 p.m. When the clock hit 11 p.m. and Sarah still hadn't returned, Linda tried calling her cell phone. There was no answer. By midnight, she called the police. The local police department, believing it to be a case of a runaway teenager, didn't initially treat it as an emergency. They assumed Sarah had simply decided to stay at a friend's house or gone to visit someone else without telling her parents. Greenwood was a small, peaceful town, and runaway teens were not uncommon. But days stretched into weeks with no sign of Sarah. Her phone remained off, and there were no credible sightings. Friends and family scoured the town, but it was as if she had disappeared into thin air. No one, not even Sarah's close-knit group of friends, seemed to know anything more. The town's police efforts remained stalled, and soon, the case began to fade from public interest. That's when Jane Parks, a seasoned private investigator from Chicago, was brought in by Sarah's family. Linda had reached out to Jane after becoming frustrated with the lack of progress from the local police department. Jane had a reputation for solving cold cases, especially those involving young people, and was known for her relentless pursuit of the truth. Jane's first step was to revisit Sarah's social media profiles. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Sarah was active on all of them, sharing posts about her friends, school, and daily life. Jane discovered something unusual in Sarah's Instagram account. In the last post Sarah had shared before her disappearance, there was a cryptic comment. It was a reply to a comment on one of her pictures. "See you soon, if you really want to." At first glance, it seemed innocent enough, a flirty or playful comment typical of a teenager. But Jane's instincts told her that something was off. She dug deeper into Sarah's online activities and found that the comment was just the tip of the iceberg. Jane quickly discovered that in the weeks leading up to Sarah's disappearance, there had been several private messages on Sarah's accounts, messages that weren't entirely visible to her friends or family. The messages were from an anonymous user with a username that Sarah had never mentioned before. The messages were often vague, but they were unsettling. The anonymous user seemed to know personal details about Sarah's life, including things she hadn't shared openly, like her fears about the upcoming history exam, her plans to visit a local park on weekends, and even the fact that she had a falling out with one of her best friends. The messages had an air of familiarity, but also a chilling possessiveness. They read like a quiet threat under the guise of friendship. Jane's investigation took a pivotal turn when she found a series of messages on Twitter, sent from an account that Sarah had recently blocked. The messages had become increasingly manipulative in nature. The anonymous user told Sarah she would regret blocking them, hinting at knowing private details from her life that were unsettling. Jane was convinced that whoever was behind the messages had some connection to Sarah's disappearance. With this new information, Jane went back to the local police, urging them to investigate the potential link between the mysterious online interactions and Sarah's disappearance. However, police dismissed Jane's theory, focusing instead on the possibility that Sarah had left voluntarily. They did not take the digital trail seriously, despite the growing evidence that something sinister was unfolding. Meanwhile, Jane's research revealed more troubling patterns. Some of the details in the messages matched up with Sarah's school schedule, which hadn't been disclosed to the public. It became clear that the person on the other side of those online messages knew Sarah better than they should have. But the identity of the person remained a mystery. As the months passed, Jane continued to track down every lead. The police department, feeling pressure from the public and media, began looking into a few questionable individuals in town. They followed a few false leads, including questioning a former classmate who had briefly dated Sarah. But those leads came to dead ends. In early 2016, Jane received a call from a cyberforensics expert she had partnered with, a man named Tom Carter. After combing through the IP addresses associated with the anonymous user's messages, Tom found that they were all originating from a location within Greenwood, closer to Sarah's house than anyone had realized. But it didn't appear to be the work of a stranger. It was someone Sarah knew, someone who had access to her social media accounts. The revelation shook Jane. The fact that Sarah's messages had been so closely tied to her personal life, combined with the user's intimate knowledge of Sarah's thoughts and relationships, led Jane to suspect that the person behind the messages was someone close to Sarah, but someone she had been keeping secret. Unfortunately, the trail went cold again. The person responsible was never found, and Sarah's whereabouts remain a mystery. Jane Parks continues to follow the case, hoping for a breakthrough, while the people of Greenwood are left with an uncomfortable truth. Sarah's disappearance was no simple runaway situation. It was a case of digital manipulation that no one could have predicted.